All right, so we have been asked to find the roots of x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0 by using the drawn graph. First of all, what does find the roots mean? Find the roots means just a fancy way of saying to solve the quadratic equation. Or what you got to simply do is to find the values of x that satisfy the equation. Right. So how do we do then? First of all, we write the graph's equation. So what's graph's equation? It has been given to us as y equals minus x minus 2 whole thing squared plus 3. Now under this, we got to write the equation what we are supposed to solve. That is 0 equals x squared minus 4x plus 1. Now, why did I write the x's in the right? It's because look at the graph's equation. In the graph's equation, where do you see x? It is in the right. So that's the reason why I wrote x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0 as 0 equals x squared minus 4x plus 1. Now there's an issue. What's the issue? The graph's equation and the equation what we are supposed to solve are in two different formats. That's an issue. So then what do? We can change the equation what we are supposed to solve to the format of the graph's equation. How do we do it? How do we do it? We read 0. So what we got to do is we got to do the process of completing the square. So how do we complete the square? So 0 equals x squared minus 4x. What's the first thing we got to do? We got to put the plus 1 to the other side. So when the plus 1 goes other side, what does it become? Minus 1. So now it is 0 minus 1. That is minus 1 equals. How do we complete the square? The first thing you got to check is look at the coefficient of x squared. What's the number in front of x squared? Do you see a number? No, you don't. So when you don't see a number in front of a letter, what should you consider? What should you consider the number as? You should take the number as 1. So what's x squared's coefficient here? It's not to be seen, but it's there. What is it? It's 1. So when the coefficient of the square term or the x squared is 1, it's quite easy to complete the square. What do? Take the half of the middle term. So what's the half of the middle term? What's half of 4? That's 2. So you always put a plus what? Plus 2. 2's what? Square. You take the half of the middle term and square it. And what do we call this process as? We call it as completing the square. Now, when it comes to an equation, if you add something new to the right-hand side, you got to add the same new thing to the left-hand side too. So here too, we should write the same thing. What is it? Plus 2 squared. Now, what do we get? We go to factorize. We go to factorize what? X squared minus 4x plus 2 squared. Now, there is a longer method to do the factorizing or a quicker method. So let's go to the quicker method. What's the quicker method? You see a square here, and you see a square at the end too. That's 2 squared. And what's 4? That's 2 times of x times 2. So what does that mean? This can be converted to a perfect square, or this can be written as a whole thing square. How? Put the brackets, x, there's a minus here, put the minus, x minus what? 2 whole thing squared. And what do we get in the right-hand side? Minus 1 plus. What's 2 squared? That's 2 times 2, which is 4. So what's minus 1 plus 4? That gives us, what does it give us? Plus 3. That's correct. That gives us plus 3. And plus 3 is equal to x minus 2 whole thing squared. Now, have we got the equation what we are supposed to solve in the same format of the graph's equation? No, not yet. Why? Because in the graph's equation, next after the brackets, there's a constant, there's a number, see, plus 3. But in our one, it's not there. So how do we get it? So it is x minus 2 whole thing squared. Let's ask the plus 3 to go to other side. So when plus 3 goes to other side, what does it become? It becomes minus 3. So what was there in the left-hand side? It was plus 3, and it went to the other side. So what's remaining here? What is remaining in the left-hand side? That's nothing. So how do you write nothing? You put a 0. 0 means nothing. All right. So now we have written the equation what we are supposed to solve in the same format as the graph's equation. So now let's write the graph's equation and the equation what we are supposed to solve one under the other. So what's the graph's equation? Y equals minus x minus 2 whole thing squared plus 3. And what's the equation we are supposed to solve? 0 equals x minus 2 whole thing squared minus 3. Now, students, do y'all see a similarity between the graph's equation and the equation what we are supposed to solve? Yes, there is a similarity. What is it? Look at the structure, like look at the components, the numbers. It's 3 and 3, it's 2 and 2. But there is a difference too. What is it? Now, it is in the graph's equation, what's minus x minus 2 whole thing squares sign? It is minus. But in the equation, what we are supposed to solve, what's the sign of x minus 2 whole thing squared? What's the sign here? There's no sign to be seen. But we know when there's no sign to be seen, what should we take as? We should be taking it as plus. So that's the difference. It's a minus in the graph's equation, and it's a plus in the equation what we are supposed to solve. And let's look at the numbers out. In the graph's equation, it's plus 3, and the equation what we are supposed to solve, it is minus 3. So what does this mean? This means if you draw the graph of y equals x minus 2 whole thing squared minus 3, how would the graph look like? It'll be the reflection of the graph you have already drawn. So let me draw a sketch of this graph. Y equals x minus 2 whole thing squared minus 3. How would it look like? It'll be a reflection of the graph you have already drawn. And what's going to work as the mirror line? the x-axis. So how would the graph look like? I'll just put a sketch. Graph would look like something like this. It's just a sketch. I'm not drawing the exact one. So key point that you should take out of this is both the graphs would have the same points as x-intercepts. What does that mean? Both the graphs would cut the x-axis at identical positions. All right. So how is that information important for this question? Here, if you look at the equations, who is playing the role of, look at the equation that I'm highlighting in white now. That's the equation what we are supposed to solve. In this equation, who is playing the role of y? It is 0. So y is playing the role of, rather 0 is playing the role of y. So what does that mean? In order to solve this equation, you got to find the values of x when y is 0. So can you use the existing graph? Yes, you can, because the graph for this orange function would have the same points as y equals 0. So you can use the graph that has been already drawn. So that is this point. Let's color the points where y is 0. What are the 2 points? At this green point, y is 0. And there's another point whose y value is 0. What's that point? Here. So what are the values of x when y is 0? What's the green points, x coordinates, or the x value? Each tiny box represents 0.2 units. So where is the green point? There's one tiny box after 0, which means x is 0.2. So when y is 0, x is 0.2. But that's not the only answer, because there's another point whose y value is 0. What's that point? The blue point. So at that point, what's the value of x? That's 3. And how many tiny boxes? After 3, it's 4 tiny boxes. So 3.2, 3.4, 3.6, and 3.8. So the two x values when y is 0, what is it? X equals 0.2 and x equals 3.8. Now, this is one way of thinking. You also can think in another way. Let's look at that too. So we write graph's equation, and under it, we write the equation what we're supposed to solve. 0 equals x minus 2 whole thing squared plus, rather minus 3. All right. So now you see similarities between the graph's equation and the equation what you're supposed to solve. But you also see differences. What is it? It's a signs. What you see is the exact opposite signs. Because look at the graph's equation. x minus 2 whole thing squared. What's its sign? Minus. In the equation what you're supposed to solve, what's the sign of x minus 2 whole thing squared? It's plus. It's not to be seen. A sign is not to be seen. We know when there's no sign to be seen, we got to take it as plus. And look at the number outside the brackets. In the graph's equation, it's plus 3. And in the equation, what we are supposed to solve, it is minus 3. All right. Then, can we write the equation what we are supposed to solve identical to the graph's equation? Now, there's slight differences. What's the difference? The signs. So can we convert this orange equation to look exactly as this when it comes to signs? Let's try. So what can we do? We can divide the orange equation by minus 1. So by dividing an equation by a particular number, we don't change the meaning. It's the same equation, but with in a different or in a new format. Got it? So how do we do that? X minus 2 whole thing squared minus 3, and it's 0. We divide all the terms by minus 1. So now what do we have? What is x minus 2 whole thing squared divided by minus 1? Now, as I told you earlier, what's the sign here? It's plus. So plus divided by minus. What would that give us? Plus divided by minus, minus x minus 2 whole thing squared. Minus divided by minus. That's plus 3. And what is 0 divided by minus 1? Whenever you divide 0 by anything, what should be the answer? It is 0. Now, we see something special. What's the special thing that happened? Look at the graph's equation. What's the graph's equation? Y equals minus x minus 2 whole thing squared plus 3. And look at the equation what we're supposed to solve. The equation what we're supposed to solve, 0 equals minus x minus 2 whole thing squared plus 3. So now, who is playing the role of y in the orange equation? It is 0. So y has become 0. So what they're asking here is, when they ask us to solve the equation or find the roots, they're asking us, when y is 0, what are the values x could take? So there are 2 points on this graph where y value is 0. What are those 2 points? Let's mark them. This blue point and this green point. So what's the blue point's x value? That is 0.2. And there's another point where y value is 0. That is the green point. So at the green point, what's the x value? It is 3.8. So now what have we done? We have found the roots of x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. I hope it makes sense.